Welcome everyone to another Figure Friday. Today we'll be taking a look at the Polynian Shamrock. This is of course the updated version that was released later. For those of you who don't know, Shamrock was originally number 2 in the Polynian line, but sometime later, him and Clover got a re-release as the version update. They were released as numbers 10 and 11, and of course here we are with 11, which would really be number 2, so we're just going to go in that order. As you can see, this box is very similar to the other Polynian figures, but this time there is a low opacity version of Shamrock in the background, doing a bit of a love symbol with his hand and showing off his robo booty. We can open the box to a windowed display, and of course inside we have the figure, the accessories, and on this side some info and screenshots. And as we can see here by the box, it explains the new waist joint that they've included with the redesign. For those of you who don't speak Japanese nor read it, this basically says the waist and hip have been redesigned. This allows with better compatibility with other parts, and meanwhile is less restrictive for posing. On the side of the box we have Shamrock flexing their tiny little robo arm, showing that they are tough stuff. And of course the back has a myriad of shots of the character, showing off the robo booty and some of the cute new hands and parts, as well as more screenshots and advertisements for other figures below. Finally on this side we have a very moe cat pose, and on top just a very simple shot. Without further ado, let's open up this trap. Inside the box we had a small pamphlet that I think is just telling you how to disassemble and reassemble the joints. I really can't be bothered to try to read all this right now. As per the usual, we have the hexagonal peg stand for its foot in the bottom tray. And of course, we have the figure itself, along with many accessories here. Shamrock is adorable, very clean, very precise, very smooth. We have a smiling face, a surprised face, 2 open hands, 2 hands with holes that would allow them to hold something, 2 slightly open hands as well that could allow them to hold different accessories, maybe not meant with the line. We also have the rock and roll style love symbols, and a pair of balled fists, and finally, an alternate torso. Now forgive me if I'm wrong, but this is just the original waistline, because there's no actual separation between where the waist ball would go and the actual hips and whatnot. So this would be a little bit more restrictive, but I guess a little bit more seamless if you put it onto the figure. And finally, we have Shamrock himself. Now right out of the box, the joints are nice and tight, but of course, with a little bit of loosening up, these things pose wonderfully. Now last time I called these ball joints, but they're not exactly ball joints because they don't move on the ball itself. The ball actually has 2 pegs. As you can see here, each ball has a peg here and a peg where it connects to the other side of the joint. Now this is still very good for range of motion because the ball can be rotated, which will allow it to go in and out, but on different angles. So you can actually spin that whole peg and get a lot of motion out of it, but I did just pop that leg off. That's the one good thing about these pieces, is that they do come out rather easily, but they don't break very easily from what I can understand. I posed the original 2 of these very, very often, and they never broke. So I'll say that these are at least somewhat sturdy. They can be a little bit of a pain to try to figure out, but once you get the hang of it, they actually have a great range of motion. It's the same as any of the other Polynian figures, where it allows you to get a lot of cool poses, very dynamic poses, and as I've noted before, some people even use these figures as references for art. But let's get a full breakdown. The head is of course on the same kind of joint as all the others, these ball pegs, which allow for an up and down, a left to right, a full swivel, and you can of course rotate the ball so that you can get all sorts of pivoted angles out of that head. The hair of course will pop off from the front, which will allow you to change out the faceplate. The shoulder of course has the same range, where you can swivel a full 360 degrees, you can lift it up and down, and of course that can be moved around to get even more motion. The elbow is similar in having a full swivel, and of course a pivot up and down, which can be moved to whatever angle you like. Same with the wrist, the same with the leg, the same with the knee, the same with the ankle. The only thing that I think is worth showing that's different is the actual waist. The waist was toted on the box as one of the newer features, so let's show you that. Now, this waist comes apart. there are two pieces here rather than just one solid piece, and I don't know how much this actually allows for any more movement, but I mean, I suppose it does. Compared to this piece, you can probably understand that this will actually give a bit of leeway in twisting and whatnot. With a ball peg on the other side, you can get an up and down, you can get a full swivel out of it, and of course when that's plugged in, that allows for a lot of posability. So let's pose this figure. As we can see here, I'm using one of his grabbing hands and his open hand to have him hold the Lance of Longinus. Compensating much? Who are you kidding? Have you seen his bulge? And just like Clover, he looks great in pictures and of course video. The pale pastel pink of his hair compared to that very soft, almost bluish white of his skin is just a perfect contrast for a character like this. And with those gray joints, the contrast is perfect. You can see all of the separation between him and everything just looks right. And here I used a Figma stand to have him leap over top Airman. Airman is clearly not amused. The figures usually have a hole in the head and just above the butt. This allows you to adapt several types of stands to them if you want to put them in more dynamic poses, maybe jumping, or something more action-oriented. But typically, they stand pretty well on their own, and then of course with the hexagonal stand, they also stand pretty good with the foot peg. And here we have Shamrock looking like a total thought with his female counterpart, Clover. These are of course both of the updated versions with their new joints and all their new accessories. And both of them are on their hexagonal peg stands, so they actually stand pretty well on these. And maybe even somewhat suggestively, Shamrock would like to present you his banana bird. Now, as you might imagine, I absolutely love this figure. I think that Shamrock was actually one of their better designs. The ambiguity of the gender and just the overall adorableness of the actual character made it a very interesting purchase. He, along with Clover, were of course what really drew people to the original figures to begin with. This updated version is wonderful, and it really does bring me back to when I first started buying these figures quite some time ago. It's really great to have these figures back again with more posability and, of course, all the new accessories. Originally, these figures only came with a pair of hands additionally. Interchangeability is of course very important with these figures because they all are compatible with one another. You can swap the face, the hands, the heads, pretty much anything goes with these guys. So they can be customized and you can do a lot with them. I actually used a couple of the hands from Clover on Shamrock in this video. And with all this praise, I do have to say there's at least one or two things that I don't like about this figure. The first thing is that these figures are somewhat soft, so they can scratch pretty easily, and even the faces can wind up getting small scratches from the hair being on them when you have to swap them out. So be careful with these figures, because if not, you could actually leave marks on them without even knowing. The other problem I have is with some of the accessories. With Shamrock, for some reason, you got two pairs of closed fists, which I really don't understand. Additionally, there's these pieces, the slightly opened hands that would allow them to hold an accessory. Now pay attention to what happens when I put the hand on. Now I'm not so sure if you can see it, but there's actually a slight dent in the top of the hand. There's so little space between the hand and the peg hole that when you put the hand on the peg actually causes a bit of a protrusion in the plastic of the hand. Strangely enough, it's only happening on one side and not the other. It could just be that I'm unlucky, or it could be just bad design in my opinion. The last problem I have is with this hand. Looks great, but then you look here and you can see there's a huge black mark. Now I actually rubbed at this quite a bit with a bit of wet paper towel and it didn't come off. So I'm not quite sure if this is just extra molding on there, but it doesn't look good and I do want to get rid of it. But luckily I think I have an extra hand like this that came in the additional hands pack. At the end of the day, flaws and all, I absolutely love Shamrock. He's adorable, his design is perfect, and he poses really well. Along with the other Polynian figures, they're all really fun to just play with and pose. I'm saying this as an adult male. These things are just fun to mess around with and take pictures. So if you were ever hesitating, then please pull the trigger and absolutely buy yourself a Polynian Shamrock. You won't be sorry, but your friends may question your sexuality. The only unfortunate thing about this figure is the price. Originally, these figures retail at about $50, but of course, once they come over to America, people hang on to them for a little while and they go out of print, they shoot up quite a bit. Just like the original Polynian Shamrock, this figure has shot up at least 3 times the cost. Most recently, I've seen these figures go for around $100, brand new. So if you shop around and put on some eBay alerts, you can eventually find this figure at a decent price. And even at double the cost, I still think this figure is probably a little too expensive at $100, though the $50 price point is just about perfect. Make sure you reserve your figures so you don't wind up getting ripped off in the long run. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. If there's any figures that you want me to review, please drop it in the comments below. I have the entire Polynian line, and eventually I will be going through and reviewing all of these figures. Until then, thanks for watching. Please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want more weeaboo goodness.
Hey, mister, what are you looking at? Stop checking out my robo butt.